If you read a film magazine in 1934, it's very likely that you'd find an article introducing the next big movie star, Merle Oberon, to the American public. Of course, Merle Oberon was just a stage name. Her real name was Estelle O'Brien, Estelle Merle O'Brien Thompson. Or wait, was it actually just Estelle Thompson? Anyway, she grew up in Tasmania, or more broadly, Australia, with her English parents before moving to India. When she was just a teenager, she accompanied her uncle to England while he was on leave with the army. He was going off on holiday, and she snuck onto the boat to travel with him. So, regardless, when she finally got to England, she worked her way up until she became a big star. Maybe, if you were reading a film magazine in 1934, you might not notice these inconsistencies from issue to issue, publication to publication. But these inconsistencies were plentiful enough that in hindsight, we can see them for what they are. A mask, a fabricated tale to hide a truth that, if discovered, could have derailed Merle Oberon's life. See, Merle Oberon hadn't been born in Tasmania to English parents at all. In fact, she'd been born in Bombay, now Mumbai, and grew up in severe poverty. That she had risen to stardom at all was a miracle. To maintain that stardom would require sacrifice, obfuscation, and assimilation few other stars could ever comprehend, much less handle. Today, Oberon is best remembered for becoming the first Asian woman to be nominated for the Best Actress Oscar, and for her performance in William Wyler's 1939 adaptation of Wuthering Heights, a story itself concerned with how racial ambiguity and otherness relates to a person's station in the world. Or is it? Given the release of Emerald Fennell's latest adaptation of Emily Bronte's novel, I thought, what better time to tell Merle Oberon's story, the path she took toward her performance in Wuthering Heights, and to explore the layers of irony at work on and off the screen here, about Hollywood, whitewashing, and otherness. To help me out, I turned to two authorities on the subject: my friend, YouTuber, and literature scholar Princess Weeks, who has made some incredible videos about Wuthering Heights in the past, and Mayukh Sen, author of Love Queenie, Merle Oberon, Hollywood's first South Asian star. His book was integral to this video coming together, and I truly only skimmed the surface of what he uncovered for it, so definitely check it out. I left links where you can follow him and buy his book in the description. All right, let's get started. Things were never simple for Estelle Merle Thompson. She never knew her British father. The Sinhalese woman she believed to be her mother was actually her grandmother. Her real mother was the woman she believed to be her half-sister. Born in Bombay in 1911 under the colonial rule of the British, her mixed heritage exposed her to the casual racism and discrimination inherent to empire. Living in abject poverty, the family scraped by from Bombay to Calcutta, unsure, or rather unconvinced, that they could improve their status in a highly segregated society. Enchanted by cinema, she dreamed of becoming an actress, and at age 18, finagled a way to move to England with her grandmother, where she hoped to make a new life for herself and potentially create a new identity that would finally grant her social mobility. London proved just as difficult as India at first, but she auditioned, and eventually she caught the eye of director-producer Alexander Korda. As the founder of London Films, Korda was an enormously influential figure in the struggling British film industry. Oberon had very little training as an actress, yet Korda believed in her star potential and signed her to a contract. Knowing the biases operating within the British film industry, he set about inventing a new history for Thompson that would obscure her true past and more overtly classify her as white. She became Merle Oberon, named after the King of the Fairies in A Midsummer Night's Dream, born to British parents on the island of Tasmania.
What my research and reporting surface is that no, it was very much Alexander Korda's team over at London Films in the spring of 1932 who gifted her this new studio biography, right? From my understanding, especially in reading, prior biographies of Korda, like the one that Charles Drayson wrote, is that they essentially, he and his team found the most remote possible place on the planet within the British imagination, right? And they said, oh, right there, and there were very few stars from that era who came from Australia. Of course, the other one is Errol Flynn, right? And something that didn't make it into the book is that allegedly Errol Flynn, like a few other folks in Hollywood, he knew the truth about Merle, right? And so whenever he would hear this line about her allegedly coming from Tasmania, he would say, oh, come on, I don't believe that, right?
Tasmania would eventually be a convenient location for American audiences too, most of whom didn't have a very intimate geographical knowledge of the British Empire. As one writer in Screenland later conceded, I admit I have no idea just where that is. Her breakout role came in 1933 as Anne Boleyn in The Private Life of Henry VIII. She appears only briefly in the film. I mean, Anne Boleyn does famously die, but audiences noticed her. The film opens on Henry's court preparing for Boleyn's execution. The whole thing is very darkly comic, everyone joking about the upcoming beheading. The executioners poke fun at each other.
In one word, a Frenchman.
I could think of another word.
Anne even pokes fun at her own imminent death.
Isn't it a pity to lose a head like this?
But Oberon summons emotional heft where necessary, mournfully looking out from the platform as she prepares to die. The performance confirmed Corda's wisdom in signing her. Now they just had to build on such a small supporting role. In spite of the elaborate backstory cooked up to assimilate Oberon into the white British film industry, Corda immediately funneled her into parts that exoticized and eroticized her as young, flirtatious foreign women. In the battle, she plays the wife of a Japanese naval officer who must seduce a British attaché. In The Broken Melody, she plays the daughter of a Parisian landlord who also, I guess, sings at a cafe.
Attractive, eh? Devilishly attractive.
In The Private Life of Don Juan, she plays a Spanish dancer who earns the attention of the notorious lover. In The Scarlet Pimpernel, her first true leading role, she plays Lady Blakeney, a former actress and the wife of a nobleman who is secretly saving French aristocrats from death during the French Revolution. All the while, Oberon dreamed of making a go of it in Hollywood. The American film industry was much larger than the British film industry and theoretically could offer greater roles in better funded productions, leading to greater stardom. The opportunity came after a brief encounter, romantic at least at first, with Joseph Skank, then president of the distribution company United Artists. He found a part for her in the musical Folies Bergères de Paris as the wife of a philandering banker. She accepted the part and made her way to the United States, where the background Corda invented for her would be just as necessary, if not more so. Interracial relationships were forbidden under the strict censorship of the Hays Code. If she wanted to be a leading lady in Hollywood, she would have to be white to act alongside white co-stars in romantic dramas.
The Hays Code had that clause about miscegenation that, within the text itself would refer to romance between black and white races. But, as most of us know, it was interpreted broadly enough to kneecap the careers of people like Anna May Wong, for example, right? And that was certainly true for Merle. But there was this larger set of political agitations that was essentially forcing her hand and leaving her with very few choices but to pass as white.
In 1917, Congress passed a sweeping immigration bill nicknamed the Barred Zone Act that excluded broad categories of immigrants from entering the United States, including anarchists, alcoholics, and insane persons. The main target of the ban, however, were Asians who lived in the so-called Barred Zone, which encompassed most of South Asia, but was specifically meant to target Indian immigrants. South Asians were also the target of a 1923 Supreme Court decision, which determined that because Asians were not white, they were ineligible for citizenship via naturalization. As a result of this decision, about 50 Indian Americans who had successfully applied for and received U.S. citizenship were denaturalized, stripped of their citizenship for no other reason than their race. Laws like these governed the United States immigration policy through 1946. In other words, Oberon's secret wasn't simply about ensuring eligibility for roles. it also protected her legal status.
I think that's what I really wanted to stress in my book, is that, it had people found out the truth about Merle Oberon, it wouldn't just signal the end of this glamorous Hollywood career, right? It would also, she would face expulsion from the country in a time when, there's so much more at stake than just that career of hers, right? It was this entire life that she had built for herself on such shaky ground.
Oberon's role in Folies Bergères de Paris didn't exactly achieve what she'd hoped. She was playing yet another coquettish foreign woman, and the film didn't really make a splash. So she neither redefined herself for her new audience, nor sold herself as a real star in the making. But that opportunity was closer than she knew. Samuel Goldwyn was looking for a hit. As an independent producer, he didn't have the resources of the major studios, but he was hoping to sign some actors with big potential to long-term contracts. He wanted to remake the 1925 silent film The Dark Angel in sound because he believed its heroine, Kitty Vane, was a foolproof role, the greatest ever written for a girl. Vane finds herself in a love triangle in the middle of World War I. She marries one childhood best friend, but when he dies on the front, she marries the other, unaware that the first husband is actually still alive. Goldwyn thought he could launch a career with this role, ensuring his studio, like the majors, would have a bankable star on its roster for years to come. Oberon had seen the silent version of The Dark Angel as a girl in India and desperately wanted to play Kitty. She just had to convince Goldwyn and Korda that she could do it. Goldwyn originally wanted Madeleine Carroll to play the part, but Oberon campaigned hard, cabling Korda in London to fight on her behalf. Goldwyn was intrigued by Oberon. Yes, she had been cast as the vampish exotic, but perhaps he could reframe her as a different kind of exotic, his answer to Greta Garbo. Korda and Goldwyn went back and forth and eventually agreed upon a 5-year contract that called for 3 pictures a year between them. The deal gave Oberon's career a really unique arrangement, a star committed to 2 separate studios on 2 different continents, splitting her allegiance between Korda and Goldwyn. Goldwyn, who knew the truth about Oberon's origins, set about consciously whitening her image, remodeling her into a typical English girl to increase her marketability for American audiences. Gone was the heavy makeup to lengthen her eyeline or arch her brow. As Kitty Vane, she sports a stylish short bob and simply tailored dresses with understated patterns. She pines for her lover gone to war, demurely succumbing to tragedy, romance, and her beautiful leading men. Oberon received glowing reviews for The Dark Angel, many of which focused on her new persona. The exotic Oberon of former films is gone, and in her place is a new, vibrant personality and a natural, effortless actress who by this one performance alone merits a secure place on the roster of the movie's great. More specifically, the press widely reported on and glorified Goldwyn's influence on her new persona. No longer bizarre, today they talk of the wholesome English star. Sam Goldwyn, smart man that he is, made her take all that vampish makeup off. She emerged a wholesome and beautiful modern young woman. Here's one that I found particularly ironic. Goldwyn let her be natural, endeavoring to let the real Merle Oberon emerge. From her, he has taken all the veneer of artificiality, all the dark braided hair, all the gold paint makeup, all the slinky dresses. He is letting her true personality be free to project itself. How is it possible to be herself when she had to lie about a fundamental part of her identity in order to get the kinds of roles she got, when the United States closed its doors to anyone born where she had been born? At the same time, reading articles about Oberon from this time, you start to perceive a strange cognitive dissonance happening. On the one hand, they buy into Goldwyn's idea of Oberon as this white English rose. On the other hand, they could not resist describing her in racialized terms, pointing to some vague sense of otherness. She had flashing almond eyes, her slanting eyes, dark and porcelain-like beauty, that faintly oriental slant to the dark eyes, that clear saffron skin, those red lips. She captured the word exotic. I don't know whether being born on the island of Tasmania and then being brought up in India has anything to do with the subtleties of Merle's face, but certainly there is that about it which is not to be found on other girls' faces.
He said hello, but something about the way he said it just...
So the suspicion was there, but consciously squashed and manipulated where necessary.
As Merle was kind of making a name for herself and becoming a well-liked person within Hollywood, there were people who kept her secret for her, right? There were many people who did not know, but by that same token, you had people like Norma Shearer, for example, and others in whom she could confide about this secret. And, I think that having that sort of army of people who supported her really allowed her to sustain a career and not have that secret leaked out, because it really could have destroyed the entire life that she built.
The secret was kept not just through the kindness of strangers, but also through extreme measures taken to ensure that she could physically pass. Sunny Los Angeles proved a much more challenging environment to navigate, much easier to tan than it had been in London. And if she got too tan, the studio made her undergo day-long skin bleaching sessions to lighten her complexion for the camera. In one case, on First Comes Courage, the crew delayed shooting for a week after a trip to Palm Springs, hoping that her skin would fade. I genuinely can't imagine the mental strain it must have caused to maintain this ruse, the pressure she must have felt to monitor her own body so intimately, all for the sake of meeting a standard so cruelly imposed, to sate ambitions that any white woman would have been free to pursue.
Passing is for them, not for us. You know what I mean? Like, they are seeing us as whatever they want, even though we're navigating these things differently. And I think with Merle, for example, it's like, it just proves how colorism is such a huge, and phenotype and all that, like, racist, like, race science bullshit is a huge part of how people perceive others. Like, it doesn't really matter what you are, it's what you look like.
Oberon's positive reviews for The Dark Angel yielded her a Best Actress Oscar nomination. Her fellow nominees included Elizabeth Bergner in Escape Me Never, Claudette Colbert in Private Worlds, Katharine Hepburn in Alice Adams, Miriam Hopkins in Becky Sharp, and Bette Davis in Dangerous. The award was Davis's to lose due to the previous year's debacle over Of Human Bondage, which you can learn all about here, and sure enough, she took the Oscar home. Regardless, Oberon's achievement was groundbreaking, whether it could be acknowledged publicly or not. And it proved Goldwyn's instincts correct. Perhaps he had signed the next big thing. And yet it wasn't as easy to capitalize on her early success as they would have liked. She quickly starred in a series of films for Goldwyn, each reinforcing a glamorous white image. First was These Three, based on the play by Lillian Hellman that you might know better as The Children's Hour. Oberon plays the Audrey Hepburn role. This being 1936, however, the story had to contend with strict censorship by the Hays Office, and the play's references to homosexuality were scrubbed clean. Martha is no longer a closeted lesbian, but harboring feelings for Karen's boyfriend, warping the film into a clean heterosexual love triangle.
He never knew about it. He never even thought about me. I think I've loved him since the first day we came here.
Straight Martha gets to live, by the way. She followed that up with Beloved Enemy, a historical drama that takes place during the Irish War of Independence. She plays an English girl who falls in love with the Irish rebel leader that her father is trying to capture.
Is it nonsense to think that you can mow down the young men of two countries and not leave a hatred that'll last 1,000 years? Why don't you treat them like human beings?
Oberon then went back to England and Corda and had one of the most challenging years of her life. Her grandmother passed away, and she experienced a horrific car crash that left her with severe scarring on her body, a major concern for someone whose looks were such an integral aspect of her career. Oberon stayed in England until 1938, making 2 comedies for Corda, The Divorce of Lady X, her first film in Technicolor, and Over the Moon. She then returned to the United States to make The Cowboy and the Lady, another romantic comedy about the daughter of a presidential candidate who falls in love with a plain-spoken cowboy. While these performances earned Oberon some decent reviews, none put her back in the awards conversation, nor did they prove her a particularly significant box office draw. Goldwyn was starting to lose faith in his investment, but her biggest role was just around the corner. In 1936, Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur collaborated on a spec script of Wuthering Heights over the course of an 8-day vacation in Vermont. The script bounced around town before landing on Goldwyn's desk, and he wasn't really sure about it at first, so he sent the script to William Wyler, who loved it. Wyler wanted to do it with Bette Davis, who then asked Warner Brothers to buy it for her. That kind of hype was all Goldwyn needed to hear. If Warner Brothers wanted it for Bette Davis, there must be something to it. If it was a good enough vehicle for Davis, then surely it would be good enough for Oberon. Maybe this would be the film to really elevate her to major stardom. The next question was, who would play Heathcliff? Ben Hecht suggested a young actor he'd recently seen in an Alexander Korda production called 21 Days, Laurence Olivier. Goldwyn had reason to believe that he would work well with Oberon, given that they had co-starred in The Divorce of Lady X together and got along well enough, even if Olivier privately harbored the opinion that Oberon wasn't a very good actor.
How do you know so much about women?
Because in my profession, I have to be able to see what's behind those lovely, deceiving lips.
Are you a dentist?
No!
But if Olivier had been a good sport on Divorce of Lady X, he came into Wuthering Heights in a decidedly less sportsmanlike mood, which he maintained throughout the shoot. The film was a Merle Oberon vehicle, so of course, Goldwyn refused to cast Olivier's girlfriend, Vivien Leigh, as Kathy, and he was pissed. When Goldwyn offered Leigh the role of Isabella instead, she declined. "Look, Vivien," Wyler told her, "you're not known in the States. Nobody's ever heard of you there. Someday you might become known, but for your first role in an American film, you're never going to get a better part than Isabella." There could not be a more hilarious punchline than the one fate had in store for her. One certainly could envision Davis or Leigh as Kathy, but Oberon serves the role well. She can be bratty and pretentious, but is animated by severe devotion. The highs of innocent love, imagining potential futures, and the lows of panic and desperation as she screams for Edgar to kill Heathcliff. Hecht and MacArthur's screenplay, like many adaptations since, ends with Kathy's death, omitting the second half of the novel, which concerns the next generation of Lintons and Earnshaws. As Gabrielle Stetcher points out in her article, Wyler's Wuthering Heights, Genre, Transnationalism, and the Adaptation of the Victorian Novel, American standards for censorship played a part in cutting the more sadistic, violent aspects of the original book. The Hays Code demanded that bad guys get their comeuppance, that bad deeds are met with consequences, and the good guys win. In a complex text with no clear moral through line like Wuthering Heights, adapting the novel this way proved a convenient shortcut to meeting that standard.
It's about the agony and distraughtness. And if you just have it so that she dies tragically, Heathcliff is like, "No, you're my soul, I love you, come back, come back, come back," and you end it there, you don't have to deal with the fact that then he abuses children and sexually assaults his wife, and then he becomes so monstrous that he perpetuates all the cycle of abuses that were done to him onto others.
Goldwyn's film, then, would become less of a gothic horror about generational trauma and more of a conventional American romantic melodrama, glamorizing Kathy and Heathcliff's undying, albeit toxic, devotion to one another. Ironically, one thing the film does retain from the original novel is the racial ambiguity used to describe Heathcliff.
Very early on, you see this kind of repeated reference of him being dark, savage, a lot of very racially coded language, and him repeatedly being referred to as the G word is a consistent thing. And there's a mention that when he was first in Liverpool that he was speaking a strange language. So there are all these little indicators.
The film borrows many of these lines from the novel. For example,
"You're a prince in disguise."
Dear?
I said your father was emperor of China, your mother an Indian queen.
A gift of God, although it's as dark as if it came from the devil.
Olivier seemingly adopted this interpretation of the character as well, lathering himself in dark makeup, a kind of subtle brown face, to get into character. Scholars have been debating Bronte's intent as to Heathcliff's identity for years. Possibilities range from him being Black to Romani or even South Asian. And while there's no one true, provable, agreed-upon answer, ultimately what matters is that this ambiguity is used to otherize him.
And who he is racially is part of why Kathy says that she would be, what did she say? She said degraded if she were to be with him. It's not simply that he's not wealthy. It's also that they would be it would lower her class setting to be with a man of color. Like, it's just something that was just not done. To be with someone who's even perceived to be, Romani, that would be like a huge, taboo. And so that is sort of caked into it.
Some critics picked up on the film's gestures towards the novel's racial concerns, describing Heathcliff matter-of-factly as non-white, oftentimes using this word. That this early adaptation chose to retain this aspect of the novel speaks not just to an accurate reading of the book, but also to the normalized, widespread practice of casting white actors in non-white roles in this era.
So I think for this particular adaptation, I just think that they kept it in because it was true to the book, but they didn't feel like it really mattered to the character. They feel like him just being dark and brooding actually probably validated that heritage anyway, because in this time period, if it is miscegenation, it has to be bad. So I think it just fits into their stereotyping anyway for him to not be like a regular white person in that text anyway. And that's kind of why we don't see it really dealt with in this one, and then why subsequent ones also are just kind of like, well, they cast Laurence Olivier, so it must be fine.
The layers of irony here just pile up. A white man wearing dark makeup to indicate racial ambiguity, co-starring with a South Asian woman who bleached her skin to erase any hint of racial ambiguity. We can see how whiteness takes priority and becomes standardized, and in doing so perpetuates itself, becoming the influential images that new artists reference as they produce their own work. Because of course, caked in makeup or not, Olivier was far from the last white man to portray Heathcliff, and it's that tradition that quite literally influenced Emerald Fennell's casting of Jacob Elordi in the latest adaptation.
So Jacob was playing Felix in Saltburn, and obviously in the mid-noughties, the sideburn was quite a big moment. And when I first saw him in the haircut, I realised he looked exactly like the Heathcliff on my sort of very, very well-worn copy of Wuthering Heights that I'd had since I was a teenager.
In this context, Oberon's covert casting becomes all the more striking.
It's quite an irony that this South Asian actress who had to hide who she was in the world would play this canonically white character. And to me, it really demonstrates the lengths to which Goldwyn was really trying to make her image as white as possible. And I think that, what this leads me to is just that, one of the real wonders of Merle's career is that, I think that whether she realized it or not, and what to my mind does make her a pioneer in some ways, is that she was fighting for a Hollywood ecosystem in which her racial background would not predetermine the sorts of roles that were available to her, right? Versus white performers like Laurence Olivier, they had all these roles at their disposal, right? Of course, that was not the last time that Olivier engaged in some racial cosplay, let's say. And again, I love this man so much. Like, he was an amazing actor. He's one of my favorite actors, right? But that was just, the way things were in Hollywood back then, right? But, Olivier, he had just this array of roles that were available to him, right? And I think that what Merle wanted, and I think what Merle really did fight for, was a reality in which she could have the pick of the litter, so to speak, as well, despite the fact that, had people known about her true racial identity, they would have, cast her aside as, barmaids or waitresses or whatnot.
Oberon's reviews for Wuthering Heights were good. She had never done better work. but not overwhelmingly positive, with many critics saying she didn't quite match Olivier's barnstorming performance. The film performed all right at the box office, but was extremely popular with critics and the Academy. Although Wyler and Olivier were nominated for Oscars, however, Oberon was not nominated for Best Actress. Instead, the Academy chose Bette Davis in Dark Victory, Greta Garbo in Ninotchka, Greer Garson in Goodbye Mr. Chips, Irene Dunne in Love Affair, and the woman who should have been grateful to play Isabella, Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind. In the Academy's defense, 1939 was a famously crowded year with a long list of snubs. Marlene Dietrich in Destry Rides Again, anyone from the women, Jean Arthur in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Barbara Stanwyck in Golden Boy, Ingrid Bergman in Intermezzo. Hell, Judy Garland should have gotten a nomination for The Wizard of Oz instead of receiving a Juvenile Award. But what set Oberon, and frankly Jean Arthur, apart from these other snubbed women was the general enthusiasm the Academy had for Wuthering Heights outside of her performance. The film received 8 nominations, the third most of any film that year. The snub felt like a pointed message, a confirmation of her wider status within the industry.
When The Dark Angel was released, she had the golden machine behind her, and so I think many people in Hollywood saw her as this sort of shiny new toy. She was a novelty, and that factor definitely allowed her to, have this welcome to the club type of nomination, right? Fast forward a few years later, the sort of promise that nod had suggested or alluded to doesn't quite pan out, because one of the reasons why she and Goldwyn decide to, part ways professionally is the fact that Merle is just unable to generate steady box office returns. So many of these films that, she is leading, even opposite, stars like Gary Cooper, right? They just do not do well at the box office whatsoever, right? And so that was one reason why she and Goldwyn do decide that, we're not going to work together anymore, and this contract is ending sooner than we anticipated by the time Wuthering Heights is released in 1939. But I think, by that point, she no longer had Goldwyn really pushing her, and also that sense of novelty that had made her so attractive a prospect to voters back in 36 when she got the Dark Angel nod. It had worn off completely, and she was seen as, I think, failed experiment is too dramatic, but, it's sort of like, okay, well, we tried to make her a bankable star, and she didn't end up really being that, right?
While Wuthering Heights represents a peak of Oberon's career in the sense that it probably her best/most remembered performance, her career was far from over. Sen maintains that her strongest work was yet to come, and his book excellently walks you through those performances, so be sure to pick up a copy or check out my Patreon to see a longer version of our conversation together. But in the meantime, here are some recommendations for your watch list so you can shower Oberon with some of the attention she should have gotten more of in her time.
The 2 most underseen and magnificent performances of hers were given immediately after Wuthering Heights. The first is Till We Meet Again from 1940. She plays a woman who is dying of this heart ailment, who falls in love with a criminal, though neither knows of the other's secret, and the gravitas that she brings to that role is just extraordinary, and it really shows the ways in which working under Goldwyn throughout the 30s really made her strengthen her skills as a dramatic technician. And the second one is Lydia from 1941, because it just, I think, bottles her star quality, but also her considerable abilities as a performer more tightly than any other film from that period. You get to see her. She plays the entire gamut. She's this bratty, impetuous young woman, a Scarlett O'Hara type, to playing this rueful old lady who's looking back on, what she could have accomplished or done in her life, and wishing that things had turned out differently. And it's just remarkable. So I think those 2 films deserve a lot more love than they get.
As I was writing this video, a massive winter storm began sweeping through the United States. It hasn't snowed like this in New York for a while, because winters have been getting warmer and warmer due to climate change. However, extreme weather like this can still occur because of a warming climate. A strong polar vortex should keep cold air contained in the northern hemisphere. A weak polar vortex pushes cold air south toward warmer atmospheres. Those warmer atmospheres hold more moisture, meaning in the winter, it's possible to see super strong blizzards like this. All of this points to a climate out of balance. And it's something I think about a lot as someone who loves nature and as someone who wants to learn about how we can actually make a difference. It's why I've joined Planet Wild. It's one of the few things I've come across that feels like a real answer to the question, what can we actually do? If you haven't heard of them, they're a community-based nature protection organization. Think of it like crowdfunding for nature. Here's how it works. Every month, Planet Wild partners with innovative environmental organizations around the globe to bring back endangered species, protect our oceans, or restore our forests. All their missions are funded by a global community of people like you and me. The part I love most is they release a video report here on YouTube so you can see how much money was invested and what the community contributions have achieved. Planet Wild is refreshing because it's solution-oriented. It shows that if we pool our resources, we can make a difference, and it's why being a member is so fulfilling. In their app and YouTube channel, you can browse their previous missions that demonstrate how much impact we, a community of like-minded people, can have. In Brazil, you can learn about how indigenous communities are leading the most successful forest protection systems in the world. Or head over to Madagascar to see how fighting wildfires and rebuilding the forest has helped the lemur population bounce back. I can't be the only one who watched Sabumafu and fell in love with these little guys. If you want to help make a positive change in the world, consider joining this growing community of around 20,000 members. You can give whatever amount feels right to you, big or small, because every penny counts when it comes to protecting nature. Because Planet Wild is sponsoring this video, the first 100 people to sign up using my code KIND1 will get their first month paid for by me. To claim your first free month, scan this QR code or click the link in the description. It's such a satisfying membership because within 30 days, you'll see a new YouTube video showing exactly how your money has made an impact. And there's no catch. You can cancel anytime with no questions asked. To see Planet Wild in action, check out their mission restoring lemur habitats here on YouTube.